noon, we're gonna finish this. In about 30 minutes, I'll put more water in here. We'll heat up more water because the ideal process is you get the water roughly around the same temperature that I put the grain in there. We're gonna get this water up to about 170, 175. This is Cascade hops, by the way. We're gonna add some of this to the mash, and it should help produce an enzyme that increases thiol production. Thiols will add like tropical fruity flavors, like passion fruit, guava, stuff like that. You wanna smell this?
Oh yeah, that smells like good.
You wanna smell it, Ethan?
Oh yeah, that smells very, very citrusy. So that's where it really gets the taste from.
So like, well, your hop flavor comes from the hops, of course. But you get the flavor for your beer from the actual grain in there too. We're gonna put let's put 4 ounces. Fuck it. We're doing things today. Yeah, we're doing things. We'll stir it and then we'll pop it off and you can smell the fucking Fruit Loops. That's essentially what this is what you call an HLT, hot liquor tank. So it just holds water. In Germany they call water liquor. So this is we're gonna recirculate the wort to kind of get everything kind of like rinsing and going, and it will help. I know that we're making a hazy beer, but it will help with the clarity of the beer anyway. Basically, you don't want the water to hit one spot because you'll create a channel. Channeling is like what you don't want because then all the wort will go in one area. You won't pull a bunch of the sugars from the whole bed. You have channeling, it'll just go through one spot or a couple spots. I want it to be evenly amongst all of it so we get all of it out of there. That's why we have this contraption to spread the water around. Oh, it's hot. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually just pulling liquid out of the bottom so that the actual grain will lay flat. So when I start pulling through, it won't have a bunch of little grain pieces in it. You can see, you can't really tell, but there's little like particles floating around there. That's little pieces of grain. I don't want that to be running through the recirculation process. I want to try and be as clear as possible. I want, ideally, like a hazy beer, like you have the proteins left in suspension, yes. Not a whole lot. The color would be from the hop oils themselves, and they kind of create like this hazing effect. It's getting clearer. It smells really good too. But the different grains give you different flavors as well. Like Pilsen malt, which is a very common malt for hazies, and well, most like IPAs and stuff. It's a pretty blank canvas. Tends to taste like those white crackers you get at church, the Body of Christ. You know, they have like no flavor. Pilsen malt is kind of like that. A little bit more flavor than that though. And then you go ahead, Maris Otter is kind of like that with a biscuit. Like a little bit of biscuit flavor in it. Not much. Nutty. Like regular 2-row is like the white part of white bread, not the crust. I guess at that point, Maris Otter would be like the brown part of wheat bread, the inside. And then Munich malt would be, which I like using Munich malt as well, is like the crust on a bread. I actually like that in IPAs a lot. I'm not using it today because it's kind of got like it's a little too much of a dark, crusty kind of flavor, and I want the hops to poke forward and be the main thing. We're using Golden Promise, which very similar to like regular 2-row, but I like the color it gives. I just like Golden Promise. It's expensive. I mean, I don't just brew it to be cheap. You know, I want to brew good beer, and I want to brew the beer I want, so. Start this. So I'm closing this so that I can kind of control the flow. So what I want is like this right up here, where it's just kind of like a steady flow. I don't want it to be like pounding down into it and just like breaking up the grain bed we just spent the last hour and 5 minutes that we've spent making. So I'm gonna run this like this until this water's up to temp. I'll hook up the boil kettle, start pulling into there. I'll run it through, there's a little basket on that wall. We'll run it through there just to make sure no grains get into the actual boil kettle, because you don't really want to boil the grain because it'll turn the color like darker and you'll get some really weird flavors you don't really want. We are right now about halfway through the process. It's gotta be the Roku thing. This is strange. The government's they've heard us talking about deep throating. Cool, sick. It's reset itself. The government.
Bands and burgers.
We're gonna attach the fuel source to the burner. Oh! Here we go. It smells fucking great. We got about 14 gallons in there. We're gonna pull about half of this and put it on top of that as it's drawing out of there though. Looking good. Been a really good brew day actually. Ideally, you want to try and get as much of the sugars out as possible. You never ever pull out 100% efficiency. Whenever I mill the grain here at home, I can get up to like 90% efficiency. I've gotten 93, but I basically turn the grain into flour at that point. You don't want to do that. Most of your like major breweries will get anywhere between like around 72 to 75%, which is pretty good. And ideally, again, the more you can extract, the less grain you have to buy. Yeah, excited to see what happens. We need about 3 more gallons. So I factored it in. And just kind of stirred around a little bit just to get everything out before I add more water to it. Still been a really good brew day though.
We are your good luck charm.
You are my good luck charm.
What's the color of our beer? It's beautiful.
That is future beer right there. This is what we call green tea. So it's actually called wort.
Will it come out like this color or a little more brighter orange?
You'll see it in a second because I'm gonna pour a little bit into that beaker over there to get a reading on how much sugar is in it. It's pretty hot. We're gonna let it cool off because I want to put it in the plastic with the glass hydrometer in there.
No, it shattered.
No, it shattered the glass, and that has mercury in it, and it's the last thing you really want in beer. And we're gonna start this up too.
Field goal attempt for Dan Campbell, Michael Backley, and the Lions. With an 8-point
That's the color.
team with
Spin
clinching
it.
scenarios today. The Vikings scenario was pretty simple.
And the way you read it is you see where the liquid like comes up on the little doodad. You read it right where you think the level actually is. So that right now is reading, it looks like 1044 because you see where it convexes up. That's at like 1042, but it's where it at the actual level is at, which is one reading below that. So it's like 1044 pre-boil. The boil is like basically concentrating it down, and it'll probably go up a little bit as it cools down. I mean, it's probably like 80 degrees. You want it to be about 65.
69, 60.
Yeah.
I mean, we mashed at 69 degrees Celsius. So the beer's gonna be about 5.5% or so. Hopefully everything goes right. Pretty close to 1050, which is, we're gonna have better extraction than before. So the initial target after boil was 1051. We're almost to 1050 right now, and that's pre-boil. So we're gonna actually concentrate it down a little more, probably be close to about 1054 after boil. So that's good news. We'll take another reading after everything's done. We're pitching into the fermenter. We'll see where we're at, and then we'll see where we're at when it's finished too.
Beautiful.
Pans and burgers. So this foam right here is proteins in the beer. They're coming out of solution as well.
That foam got hella quick.
Yeah, I told you, it's called a protein break. It's when the boil starts. You gotta keep stirring it to keep it down. I think we're pretty much through it now. We'll wait and see. This is when we start counting down how long we're boiling. Whenever it quits foaming crazy like that. This, when it goes into here, it'll get aggressive again.
That was instant. It's like throwing fucking Mentos in a cola.
Yeah. I'm actually hooking up all these lines. This right here is a wort chiller. So we're gonna use that to knock down the temperature of the actual beer. What I'm gonna do here in about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna add our brewing salts. I'm gonna run the hot wort through all of this to sanitize it. This is boiling, so it'll sanitize it almost instantly. It was already cleaned before, just another thing you do for safe practice. And then what we'll do after that, we will chill it down to about 175, and we'll throw our, it's called Whirlpool. Do a Whirlpool hop additions, pulls a lot of the like fruity flavors from the hops. All I've put in here is Cascade. It's low alpha acid. It's really prevalent in like Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale. Just use it as a slight bittering hop addition. We'll put a little bit more in when I add the salts. I'll put another ounce in, just to kind of give you a little bit of a backbone. And then we'll get really fun and creative with the hops after that. This right here is calcium chloride. This is gonna make the beer a little bit softer, makes the water soft. We're gonna add 14 grams. And our sulfates, we're gonna go with 7. So we're gonna have 2-to-1 ratio of chlorides to sulfates. This right here is gypsum. It's a calcium sulfate. I'm gonna go 7 grams. It pours very similar to like baking soda. Sulfates will bring out brighter flavors and hops. We have the chlorides to kind of like bring down the water a little bit. And this right here is yeast nutrient. We're gonna go 1/4 gram per gallon. This is just to ensure that the yeast has a good starting point to start fermentation, so we can get a nice healthy fermentation involved. It's basically just a bunch of dead yeast cells dried up with a bunch of zinc. We'll go 3.5 grams. We're gonna go 3, basically 4. We'll add our last bit of Cascade, just to get a little bit of all the dimensions of Cascade. So the 60-minute boil, 30-minute, and then this will be the essentially knockout. So we'll get a little bit of that fruitiness from Cascade. Very bright hop. So we're gonna go 28 grams. Just another ounce. There we go. And we'll add this into our beautiful beer. Oh yeah. You see, I got this hose right here. The fluid is running through all of this, sanitizing everything along the way. We have about, I'll say roughly half a gallon probably sitting in the lines. So let this sit for, we'll just hook up right now. Kill the fire. We're done with the heat now. So trying to keep things moving. The concept of the cooling is this is a counterflow chiller. So we're gonna run cold water the opposite way as to what the wort is going in back to the kettle, as you transfer the heat from the hot and you give it the cold. So we'll have some hot water, which you use to clean some stuff, and we'll have cooler wort, which we'll use to chill the beer down. That's why I have all these buckets to use to collect the water, because otherwise I'll just have water all over the ground. Go. Process number 2 is on the way.
I'm ready for some burgers.
Ready for some burgers? Jimmy, you ready for some burgers?
Yeah, I'm ready. Look at all this extra flavor on here too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best stuff right there. That's the good stuff.
And burgers. Whoops.
Do you even know how to make burgers, bro? You're fucking
Good thing I'm not the one cooking burgers at Burger Fest. And some burgers.
Oh yeah. Catsup. cheeseburger. Made with love. And I put a lot of ketchup on it, so it's even better. It's a good burger. That's a tasty burger.
The Bands and Burger cheeseburger.
Oh. And we're empty. We're gonna pour a little bit more of the actual caustic into there to get one more like cleaning cycle in there. We'll do that while this is chilled down though. So a common cleaning product in like breweries is a caustic called PBW. It's a powder, but it's very similar to OxyClean, and PBW is very expensive. So we're gonna use OxyClean, unscented.
And that'll give our beer lots of flavor, right?
Yeah, we're putting it right into the beer. Yeah, now we're gonna use it to clean the, we're gonna do another once over on these fermenters right here. Yeah, that's just a cleaning agent. We're gonna sanitize it afterwards because number one rule is sanitization, because the biggest reason why your beer fails or tastes bad is not just from overhopping or building a bad beer, but infection. And it's very prevalent if you have nothing clean. Right now we're at 160 degrees. Basically we want to try and keep it hot as possible, but before I put it into the fermenter, because it's plastic, I need to get it down below 135. I like to try to shoot for like 120. So right here is we're using to sanitize everything. It's a Star San, pretty common. Put it in this fermenter, put some water in there. It's an acid, so you want to use a colder water. The hot water will evaporate the acid out of it and pretty much renders it useless at that point. We'll put it in there, let it sit. I'll rotate the fermenter a couple times to get everything sanitized and ready to go. Right before we start pitching the wort into the fermenter, we'll empty out all the sanitizer. You don't have to rinse it afterwards. It's completely cool to just put the beer right on top of like whatever's residual in there. It's food grade safe, completely fine. So, real question is, what kind of flavors do you want? Because I have a plethora of choices here. This, I have more hops. That's Citra. We can do Citra. Let's do Citra. So this is gonna go in right now. This is called Incognito. It is essentially a hot concentrated oil. Think of it the same way you think about like wax if you smoke weed, but you know, for beer. So way better. You see like in there. Oh, that's still got the cover on it. What we're gonna do is turn the pump back on. This is how I did last time I did it. I let the wort recirculate, and I used the hot wort to free up the actual wax part of it. Ow, that hurt. I need to hurt myself all day. Citra is a very popular hop, and I do believe the Incognito part of it is relatively new to the brew world. Mosaic's been around for a while, but oh man, that smells great. Oh, yeah. Well, that's out if you want to take a whiff of that. You need to create smell-o-vision for that shit. Galaxy, we could do Galaxy. What I think I'm going for, though, is... I like Sabro, too. Well, maybe I use Sabro in there. Well, let's go safe, and we'll do Mosaic. Smells pretty good. 6 ounces of Mosaic Incognito, which is equivalent of roughly 6 ounces of regular Mosaic, but we use the higher percentage in the cryo stuff so that we can have less loss, put less plant matter inside of it. Let's say it's 305. We'll stop the whirlpool, let it sit for an extra 10 minutes. That'll be called the aroma hop stand. Collect those flavors, and we'll knock it out into the fermenter. Yeah, it does take a little while for it to cool down to our pitching temp. We're gonna shoot for around 70. We'll see how long it takes to get to 70. I can pitch it a little bit warmer. Really want to get down to 70 though, so we might be here for another 30 minutes or so.
Bands and Burgers. So what do you think this is going to sit at once it's
probably about 6.5%. Sick. I'm gonna guess it's gonna be about 6.5% now. It just makes it gonna be a stronger beer.
I love the color of it so much.
The color's great. It's gonna look way better than that too. There's some foam in there, it's fine. Food grade, it's all good. you want it to fall down far because you want to oxygenate the wort. So the yeast, yes, it needs sugars to like eat to stay alive, but it also needs oxygen in order to survive. It can live in an oxygen-free environment, but it works more effectively if you have oxygenated like beer or wort, because then it can eat it like healthily. And what it does is the yeast will eat the sugars in it, it'll shit out alcohol, and the byproduct of it doing that as well is actually CO2. So what you can do, and what this is for, is I can put a spunding valve is what it's called on top, so I can actually dictate how much pressure is kept inside, so anything that goes above it will come out. The perks of that is the CO2 will stay in solution and the beer will carbonate inside this. That's only if I can keep it cold enough still to keep it about 68 degrees for the yeast to actually even want to function. If it's about 50 degrees, the yeast would go really slow or just go to sleep, and they'll hang out towards the bottom of the actual fermenter. It's good. Oh, it's great. That little tube that's hanging down in there is I run CO2 on one side, and I have the other side hooked to, it's like a link or a jumper. So I can go from one valve like that to the same valve that's on top of one of those kegs.
Oh, okay.
And then just push the beer into the kegs.
Right.
So that it doesn't ever meet oxygen. Because the number one enemy to beer is oxygen post-fermentation. 4 gallons left.
It's incredible.
Yeah. It really is. That, my friends, is past beer. Close to 12 gallons. That's 11 and a half. Pretty good. Last step. Yeast time. Always sanitize your stuff. I'm sure it's nice and snug. We don't want any bugs to get in there. And by bugs, I mean bacteria. And kind of get a little shake. And this right here is the spunding valve. It's an airlock, so it'll allow air to escape, but it won't allow anything inside. That's why it's sitting in a pool of the sanitizer right here. And we're gonna make sure we don't put it on the side with a dip tube. Got it set to 0 pounds on the spunding valve because I don't want to really affect the way the beer turns out. What I'll probably do though is during active fermentation, probably like the 3rd day, I'll probably turn up the spund a little bit. That way there's a little pressure in there. You can keep some of those esters inside, some of the hop flavor and aromatics. And also, the last thing we're going to do is hook up this heating pad. This needs to stay as close to 68 as possible. What I'll probably end up doing is I'll set it to about 65. 69. No, well, 69 will probably be where it actually is at. And I need tape. Put a little more sanitizer in there just to be safe.
Bands and burgers, fire to the throne.
Beers and burgers.
Beers and burgers.
Burger Fest.
Beers and burgers.
Burger Fest 2023.
Motherfucker. Hi, my name is Jimmy. You've been watching Beers and Burgers. Ow.
And yeah, anytime like he was really weird about smelling farts. Like I would fart and then he'd like put his face near my ass and like really whiff it in.
It always takes me a second, and I guarantee you, the first time I light it, it won't light, and then I'll get up and turn off the gas and let it dissipate a little bit, and then go back down and do it again, and then it'll just, and I'll burn like half the hairs on my hands. Yeah, every time. Wow. Really is a fucking perfect brew day.